In our last session, we were continuing to unpack this message of John by looking at his message of forgiveness. And we saw that he was using baptism as an act of evidence. And we looked at the idea that there is this problem called sin that separates us from God, that creates a debt that needs to be paid. And we see that Jesus, who John was saying is coming, was coming in order to settle the debt that we could be right with God. And John's message was one of baptism, it was one of repentance, and it was one of forgiveness. But it was also a message of evidence, because he was saying to people to be baptized to show that they had turned from their sins to God and received forgiveness for their sins. His emphasis was on turning, but also showing and evidencing that there was a genuine turning away from the old to the new. So in our last session we understood the diagnosis, and the diagnosis was there was this problem called sin. We understand from John that the solution is to turn to God, and we understand that the action that needs to happen is that we need to receive the gift that's being offered. However, we began to touch on the idea that salvation is an ongoing response. And in the New Testament, in the Greek, salvation is actually a continuous tense. It's actually phrased as being saved. So it is an ongoing thing. Now, at this moment, I want us to be clear about one thing. It's not about works. It's very easy to fall into the trap of believing that if salvation is an ongoing thing, somehow we've got to do something to earn that salvation. We've got to do good deeds. We've got to walk the walk, talk the talk, live up to the life. And in order to receive salvation, it's necessary to understand that there's nothing that we can do to earn ourselves that salvation. It's a gift of God because we can't pay the debt. We can never settle the debt that's owed to God. And so for that reason, we are invited to receive the gift of God, which is salvation. And we receive that gift by choosing to turn our back on the old ways and walk towards God. And it's an ongoing journey of putting to death the old way of life and living for God in a new way of life. Not to earn our salvation, but as John would say in his message, turn and be baptized as the evidence of forgiveness of sins. In other words, as part of his message, as we see when we go on to verse 8, we see that he's saying bear fruit in keeping with repentance. And this is part of understanding John's message and understanding something of the message of the New Testament, that being saved is not a decision that you make once off when you're 13 years old and you tick a box or you sign a slip or you go forward at a convention. It's actually an ongoing daily decision to walk with God. Let me challenge you. John says if you are serious about following God, then baptism is a way to show that. And the same is true today. If you haven't been baptized, will you consider getting baptized to show you're serious about following God? Who rules your life?